Welcome to Havilah's podcast. Today we are tackling marriage, the idea of what is a healthy marriage? What does it look like to actually figure out where you are in your marriage? Like, what are good, healthy steps? But then also, we're going to answer your questions in this series. So we're jumping into a whole month on marriage, and I'm excited about this because today I'm not alone, because apparently you can't be married to yourself. I am with my husband. Ben Cunnington has joined me today on the podcast to rave about me and the amazing wife that I am.
That's
Go
right.
ahead.
Okay, so if you're just now starting, go back. I'm going to just basically communicate a 25-minute review.
Yes, excellent.
That's right.
Yeah, you're going to talk about you have a list, right?
Yeah, I
will
do
say
have
to
a
keep
list right here,
of
actually.
records
So
of wrong.
first
No,
off,
today we're going to jump into some of the questions and things that I would like to ask Ben, along with some of the things I think are really important when it comes to healthy marriages. So I want to say to you, when we talked about doing the marriage series, there is a part of me that is a realist. And I know that marriage is a vulnerable place. It's not a place that you check and you solve it and it's done. It's a tension that you manage. And ultimately, marriage is really two powerful people making a choice. And so I often don't jump into the marriage topic because I understand that it's not just a one message moment. It's not just a one thought. It's really a life, and there's a lot of pain and there's a lot of hope and all the things involved. And so for Ben and I to have this conversation, I almost want to do it like lightly, not that we don't have a great marriage, but just so you guys know that it's not like, look at us, we're amazing, our marriage is phenomenal, you should do everything we're doing, but more or less that wherever you are, that you'll hear some hope from us. Maybe you'll get a tip from where we are. Maybe you'll be able to find us in some event or at church and be like, hey, this would really help and go from there. But we do come from beautiful marriages. Our parents have both almost been married for 50 years, not together. We're not siblings. But
that would be a different podcast.
That would be a different podcast.
Yeah.
But our parents are celebrating 50 years. How long have your parents been married?
They hit 50 this last year in 24.
Which is amazing. And then Ben and I are rounding to
Almost
our 20th
20.
year. My sister's on her 20th. Your brother's on his, 25th
something.
almost, maybe.
Yeah.
So again, we come from really great marriages, but not that it's been easy, not that these things are just like no big deal, but we do have some success, I think, along the way. And so when we jumped in to get married, I was excited about getting married. I waited for the right person, the right man, and I was excited about marrying you. I felt like I had a lot of different people that I was curious about, wondered if God would put us together, or wondered if this would be the right person. And then just couldn't get there in my heart. Like, no, that's not the right one, or no, that's not the right thing. And when I met you, I remember just being like, this is the guy that I don't want to ever stop talking to. I think your humor was really important to me. Your good looks, right? But also just your heart for God and your ability to be teachable, some of the things that really mattered. And we had a really good friendship.
Because you had a lot to teach me.
I had a lot to teach.
So teachability
the first 5
was
years
important.
was really about educating you on
That's
how to be
right.
married to me. But also just like learning how to be married. I don't think we knew how to be married. That was like something we had no clue. I was a twin, so I assumed that I knew how to be married because I was an identical twin. So clearly you would just be my twin, but a male version. But it was very, very hard. I think the first 5 years was very difficult. And it wasn't difficult because we didn't lack love, but we lacked tools. We didn't know how to do what was in front of us. Then you add in 4 babies in 5 years. So we had, within 6 years of marriage, we had 4 babies. We had 6 years of marriage, and we had it was just an enormous amount of changes. And both you and I were kind of just catching up. You were younger than I was by 4 years. So I was entering into my late 20s.
We're the same age.
Yes,
now.
exactly.
Yeah.
But you were also growing up, I think, a little and trying to figure that out as well. So What about you? When you jumped into marriage, did you think you were ready for marriage? And were you excited about being married to me?
Yeah. Absolutely. 1,000%. I was so excited to marry you and start a life together. I think I had no clue what that actually meant, though, for sure. I think that, there's love and there's excitement and there's the the happiness and the joy and all the things of when you think of like, oh, happily ever after, and we're just going to get married and have a great life. But I was definitely naive, I think, in terms of knowing how to actually do that. It's like the thing of, you have a great wedding, but that's just a day. And then it's, you know, what does it mean to actually have a great marriage?
What was the toughest part about marriage for you in the beginning?
In the beginning, I think it was, it was communication for sure, because I realized how I didn't know how to communicate, or I didn't know how to communicate in a way that was effective. And then I didn't know what I didn't know. And so I think as I began to find out what I didn't know, I think that was hard. Also, I think just some of the family dynamics, you know, of just coming from two very different family backgrounds and the way that we grew up, the way that we were raised, I think created some unique dynamics that we had to just kind of figure out as we went.
Yeah.
That came up.
Culturally.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I mean, I came from a very intense Italian, like in your business kind of family. And you came from a very, I think, private, not in your business, you know, incredible people, but very different. And I think I was very much immersed in my family, and I didn't even know how much I really didn't leave and cleave. I was really like, you're just going to be a part of my family. And it took me, gosh, the first probably 5 years to understand that every message I was sending you was that my loyalty was to my family unit and not to you. I didn't know that. Yeah. And that was really challenging.
No, I think that's, looking back on it, I mean, I understand how that happened, right? Or how that was a factor. But yeah, I think that you coming from like a minister's home, evangelistic ministry life, Italian, your family is very communicative, only having a sister. Yep. And then your dad being an Italian, who you say is almost a girl, you know, very just communication oriented.
Yes.
My family was just not that way, you know, didn't really do conflict, didn't really talk about a lot of things, didn't really have a lot of emotional connection even. And so I think that was all just very new to me. And so, yeah, the first couple of years was a bit of a whirlwind. And then we got, you know, getting pregnant.
I know.
A year into marriage.
And what was wild is that because I came from a very intense family, I didn't want to have conflict. So initially you would have think that because I came from this intense family, I wanted to get into it and get intense. I was actually backtracking. Like, I actually don't want to have that in my life all the time, that things are intense and we're unpacking things. And so you came from a new place where you were like, I actually want to talk about things. I want to get it out. And so I would kind of run and freeze, and you would be like, well, you know, let's talk about this. And so I think I didn't have the ability to like talk about it with you because I was so scared that would be kind of part of our culture, and I didn't want that in our culture.
Yeah, no, I think that's great.
Yeah.
I think, when I could see how you wanted both worlds.
I did.
Right? Like, you want to change, you wanted to kind of leave your family, but you also wanted your cake and be able to eat it too.
Wow.
Or whatever that saying is, right? Like, oh, I want to be able to like start a new aspect of my life. But you were very close with your family. And, you know, I've become very close with your family. It took me a few years to kind of embrace the intense Italian part. But really it was more of the, I began to see it more as, oh, wow, they're actually very connected and very loving and very embracing. And I like that. So
yeah, at this point,
I came around.
If we weren't going to make it, I think they would choose you. They'd be like,
that's not
we
true.
love you, Havilah. Ben, you're ours.
I don't think so.
All right. So let's talk about some of the things that are, I think, big topics when it comes to marriage. And one of them is like, how do I communicate better with my spouse, especially when you are not getting along? Like, what do you do? And I think that's a really big conversation, because oftentimes, at least for us, that was like an introduction to completely disconnecting for a week or two and just building cases. But I know we've gotten better at that. And so I'm curious how you did it like poorly in the beginning and how you do it now, or how I did it poorly and how I do it incredibly well now.
Well, you've always done incredibly well.
Thank you.
No.
Yes.
I think in the beginning, for me at least, it was just, not having communication skills and the history and the tools to know, you know, I didn't really have a lot of experience interacting on an emotional level with females. And so I think that was new. And then also just, I think for me, as a man, not really knowing what's going on inside of me, which basically would come out as just anger all the time. And so I think
anger was a big part of our marriage in the beginning.
It was.
And I would have thought, anger, he has anger issues. But now looking back like 20 years later, I'm like, you didn't have anger issues. You had no tools to know what you were feeling.
Right.
Right.
And I think a lot of my anger was based in, I am angry that I don't know how to do this. Mm-hmm. Right. I think it's frustration and feeling just stuck. Like, not having the tools, not having the know-how to know. I want to be connected. I want to solve this. Obviously, like, guys are fixers, right? And so we want to resolve it and just fix it. But ultimately, it's about, I want to have a great relationship together, and I don't know how to do that right now. And so I think that shows up for me in anger.
And it did. And I remember going through my boundaries season, and I was learning boundaries. And one of them was like, I'm no longer willing to be disrespectful to each other. So I will take the kids and I'll go to my mom and dad's, or I'll go for a walk. And when you want to re-engage respectfully, you let me know. Mm-hmm. That was so hard for me because I was used to either fighting it out or like leaving entirely and being like, you're on your own, and abandoning you in it. And so I think it was that idea of like me learning that idea of like, okay, here's how I can set a healthy boundary without escalating it or also kind of disrespecting you in the middle of it or belittling you. Mm-hmm. And then I watched you begin to go, I need new tools. And one of those was going to counseling, mm-hmm. and you finding different counselors along the way. I had been going for probably a year and a half. I had my own things, mm-hmm. but how did you decide to go to counseling? Because I know that wasn't on your radar.
I think it was just finally, realizing like, okay, well, what I'm doing isn't working. And we had a lot of people that we knew, obviously your parents were always very helpful and encouraging. But I think within our church community, there was like, hey, there's help out there. And so I think obviously seeing you probably started with some counseling first, mm-hmm. Which I know was, so I don't know. I think it was just realizing I don't know what I'm doing, and I need someone else that's been there, that's done that. And so, I think I tried some couple of different counselors. And that was really the beginning of just, I think, opening myself up. And at the end of the day, it comes down to humility and realizing like, this is very normal. I think a counselor sometimes helps normalize things in a marriage and things that either, that I'm experiencing. And so that helped me.
Like a neutral third party. Like that's how I looked at therapy, was like, it's just a neutral third party, mm-hmm. to where somebody can help you reiterate what you're feeling. Because when you're just together, you don't hear it, even mm-hmm. though they're saying it correctly.
Yeah, so we did counseling together, some, and then some.
And then I graduated. I had been.
Yeah, and then you hit level 10, and I was still making my way. No, I think we've talked about this in other conversations, but just the idea of an individual doing counseling. For me. So I started to see the value of just me being counseled as a person, so that I could be empowered and get tools and grow so that I could show up better in the marriage. And it didn't have to be us doing marriage counseling. I was doing counseling so that I could be a better husband.
And I remember us having a really hard conversation where I was like, mm-hmm. I am not going to marriage counseling. It's not our marriage. Mm-hmm. And you were like, what are you talking about? And I'm like, and it wasn't like I had arrived, but it was like, I can't do this where you're pulling me into something that ultimately, like, I want you to feel fully powerful in mm-hmm. this area, because I had felt that in my own life with my childhood and my parents. Like, I had found my own power in therapy and like understanding like, oh, I can make choices and I'm 100% responsible. And those are things I had to learn. And I had just learned that I was like, oh, I don't want him to think that he needs me. He doesn't need me in this. Like, he can actually do this on his own. Mm-hmm. And then watching you work so hard. I think that's what I respected the most, was like, you just worked so, I could get emotional because you just worked so hard. Like, I remember you going to therapy and crying your way through it and then coming home and being like, okay, let's talk about this. And just watching you go, like, I think what was really hard for me as a wife was watching the deficit of the masculine voice in your life and the fathering that you probably needed, which I don't think was a fault of your own dad, or I just think it's just generationally. I think it's society. I think it's all of that. But like watching you just not like know how to be a man, but also in the generation that requires such emotional intelligence for men that had never been asked of that in our dad's generation. And now it's being asked at like a higher level, but just watching you like fight for it and be like, I want to do this better. And that was like 10 years of I want to do this better. We didn't have conflict for 10 years, but you kept like going after areas that you were like, I don't want to get stuck here. It was really, I'm really respect you for that.
Thanks. I think it was, I did have I even just thought this now, like early on, I grew up in a Christian home, right? Did the ministry thing. When we met, I was in a ministry environment and my aim was just, I want to serve the Lord all of my life. And I was doing ministry stuff and I felt close to the Lord and I felt like, okay. And so when you think of marriage, I had this very like spiritual maybe picture of it.
Okay.
Right. And so then when you get into it and you realize like, oh, okay, there's I need more tools than just Bible verses, right? Or just like what I know about what God wants a marriage to look like. And so when you get into real life and face situations and scenarios and things come up and circumstances and challenges and all this kind of stuff, that's when I think it all fell apart for me. Is when I was like, oh, like, I don't know what Bible verse is gonna like. What do I do?
Right.
Like
be angry and sin not.
I know
well,
how my heart needs to be, but then not having like the solution for like, oh, I don't know how to show up right now, and and then just fighting through the anger, and so getting actual tool, and shame. I think definitely shame about. Okay, how I just showed up angry with you, or how I don't know how to, do what I feel like I need to do, or be who you need me to be, or all this kind of stuff. And so, it definitely is a journey of, and I think, we were having that conversation a bit ago, even with Jay and Lauren, and just this mentality of a realization of doing something new.
Yeah.
Right. Of like, hey, we've never been here before.
Yeah.
I've never been married for a year and have a pregnant wife and been new to a family, and like having that sort of perspective, I'm really terrible at that. To be able to kind of take a 10,000 foot view, have grace and compassion, but also realize like, oh yeah, we probably need some more support and some tools or help to navigate this.
Yeah.
And so I think, looking back on it, if I would have asked for help a little sooner, that probably would have been great.
Well, if it was about working hard, we would have had the most successful marriage possible. Like if it was just about work, like just grind, like in the grind, like just tears and talking, we would have had a phenomenal marriage. But it wasn't that. We needed different types of information and tools that we didn't know about. And so a lot of it was just throwing it at the wall and seeing what stuck. I'm curious now, looking back, like what's the tool that really changed everything for you and that you utilize more now that you did not know how to use before?
I think honestly, I don't know if it was any one tool. I think the Enneagram helped me. But I think in reality, it's the more I understand me and have self-awareness, it's just really helpful.
I do agree. That was massive for us. And I know that's a conflicting, like people have their own thoughts about it. We don't, again, I think things are tools. I don't look at things as theology.
No, but I mean, lots of tools. We've used lots of tools.
Yeah,
right?
100%.
Like
I'm just saying Enneagram
tests,
can be like a trigger point.
Strength finder. Yeah,
we've used lots. And that's what I want to say is like, if you base we don't partner with weakness. We don't say, this is who I am. Like, no, God can, our colors merge together. Our numbers merge but the idea of what's my deepest core need and how do I get that need met was profound for you and I both. It changed every relationship in our life.
Yeah.
Yeah, I would agree with that.
I think it was learning more about me and how I work and how I think and how I see life. And what not my strengths, but yeah, it's I think that core need.
Yeah.
Right. What's that core need? And how do I need to get that met in a healthy way?
So let me ask you, as you started like learning that, do you like when you started thinking about being married and getting your core need met, what was the time in our marriage that you felt that you could not get your needs met?
I think it's whenever I feel powerless. Whenever I start to feel like, oh, I don't know how to just do this. So I think early on, it was probably once we had a baby.
Yes.
And once I think it's honestly though, it's like a slow boil. It's like a frog in a kettle, right?
It
Like
is.
there wasn't one moment or one situation that was like, oh, this was the thing that completely threw me off. It was, for me at least, it was just this slow kind of process of not knowing my needs also. So because I didn't know my needs, then it just slowly kind of got off track. And then I don't know.
Well, I would say that that's very true. I think in a lot of relationships, there's like one side is very giving, and the other one's taking. And I think I'm the taker, but not because I want to be the taker, but because I have my life demands so much. It's like, we have to get here, we have to do this. And I'm kind of a visionary and like, I like to get out there and do it, or experience it, I should say, more than achieving. I like to experience. And so for you, I think one of the tools that you learned probably in your childhood was you don't have needs. Just keep everything happy and peaceful and work hard and everything will be fine.
Sure.
And so I think there were different roadblocks we had in our marriage that were critical and almost detrimental, was when you didn't know you had a need and you got that need met, and then realized this is not a healthy place to get a need met, and I've got to figure this out. And when that truth comes out, like I've seen it a couple times in our marriage, very few times, but critical moments, maybe 2 or 3 times I really think of, you would immediately humble yourself and say, okay, I got to figure this out. And you would reach out for help and we would have good conversations. But I think that that's really critical. Like for me to understand that the unhealthy way of getting a need met is not a reflection of me giving you what you need. It's really a reflection of what you finding what you need. And that's hard as a wife, because you want to give everything to you. I'll do anything for you to be, who you want to be and who you need to be and all those things. So,
and I think I didn't know that. I definitely didn't realize that. Like, oh, I have to actually manage myself.
Yeah.
And I have to know, number one, what's going on inside, so that I can protect myself, so that I can grow in the way that I need to grow and become who I need to become. And that is very fluid at times. And so I think that once I began to realize, oh, wow, how much I actually don't know about myself, or how I function, how I respond under pressure, and all these different types of things. So when I realized, okay, that I need help doing that. And so, I think that I'm very much still on that journey of knowing, like, okay, and just, I think changing the patterns, right? That takes time.
I do too.
Because when you have 20 some years of doing it a certain way.
Yeah, it's challenging. And 4 kids and ministry and business and all the things.
Sure.
So I'm curious, what happens when we can't agree on a big decision? What's something that you would tell somebody?
I do it because I say so.
That's right.
Mainly.
And I submit.
Submit because the Bible says so. I just quote Bible verses.
Yeah.
Mainly.
That's been very helpful.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
And I just say, like, look, it's in the Bible. Okay. I didn't write it.
I think because I said so.
Yeah. Because I said so.
It's a really great marriage.
You don't need to worry about it.
Right.
This is the right decision.
Right.
I think, well, thankfully, I feel like we haven't had a ton of that, where it's like we have whether it's big decisions or different things. But I think when we have a disagreement, I feel like I've gotten better at being able to have a conversation about it, to hear you. Because I think
you always humble yourself. Like it's, I remember the boys once saying, like, so dad always has to say sorry first. And I was like, dang it, they see it. Like they're not, but there is something about you as a man. Again, I'm not afraid to say I'm sorry if I was.
I mean,
Just so
I
rare.
can't really, think of the
But
last
if
time.
I was, I can imagine. I mean, no, but I'm just saying, like with you and I think one of the things that's been our secret to our success of our marriage is that you will come and say like, this, what do I need to make this right? And you will humble yourself, and then you will look at our boys now and say, being a man is being willing to own it and hear them out. And so I would say that's the part that I think has been really powerful, is that you don't abandon me in it, that you really do come back and say, okay, babe, let's talk about this.
I think there's things, when I feel like we're in a disagreement, I can start to spiral when I feel like, okay, I'm not being heard.
Yes.
Or what I'm communicating isn't connecting.
Yes.
And so then I start to, again, feel frustrated and angry because of my own limitation, probably and maybe at the time it's like, I'm not convincing her, or she's not understanding. And so I do have to kind of, dial myself back and be like, okay, do I want to be right? Or do I want to have connection? Well, have connection.
Yeah.
And be close. And I think that the more that I can stop myself and ask myself that question, then I can dial it back and be like, and I think have the mentality of what's high stakes and what's not in terms of the decision that we're trying to make.
Big deal in marriage. I think that it was like, I think my sister used to say it to her husband used to say it to her, you make, what is it? You
make a big deal out of small
little things and it ruins our time together. And we memorize that. You make a big deal out of small little things and it ruins our time together. And I think probably for the first 5 years, it was like we made a big deal of stupid stuff. And ultimately now you kind of get to a point in your marriage where you're like, I'd rather just like have a good night, wake up happy than to dig through this. But there's something in marriage too, where you don't want to lose your voice and you don't want to lose yourself in it. So you tend to kind of fight for things because you're like, it's not really about the point I'm making. It's more about me feeling heard. Yeah. And you repeating what I just said to you back at me. And then me going, maybe I don't feel that strongly about it. But if I feel that you're dismissing it, then I'm going to say it a couple times because I feel really strong about it.
And I think I was definitely more prone to do that early on, especially with the dynamic of your family and the voice that they had versus the voice I had. And so trying to be heard was, I think, a challenge for me of wanting to dig my heels in and maybe create conflict.
It was like, well, everybody said this. Why are you making it hard for everybody?
Yeah.
Yeah. It was a ganging up.
It was the black sheep.
It was.
Because I wanted to do something different.
Okay. So let me just take it for one other second, which is like, or another angle. What do you think is a misconception about our marriage? That the world
that's amazing. That it's just has no, I don't mean that. It is amazing. But that it has that it's perfect, or that it's just we have done everything right, or we have it all figured out. And I think that from the outside, maybe it's like with anything, right? It's like you see a positive thing about someone's life or a success that they have, and you think, wow, they must be successful in everything they do. I mean,
like, just for everyone to listen, like once a year, I can't do this anymore. And that's not about you. That's about like I'm serious. Like that's about me. Like I get to and it's usually because I'm not owning my emotions. I'm not owning what I feel. I'm making you in charge of how I feel, whatever it might be. It's the little girl in me that goes, I don't want to do this. And then I have to realize like, wait a minute, where did you lose your power? Where did you lose that part of you? And saying like, no, I would rather be married to somebody that I love, that respects me, that loves God, that I built a life with. I'd rather fight for that than to almost like imagine doing it on my own or somehow starting over. And again, I don't glamorize that. Maybe I'm lucky that I don't do that. But there is a part of me that, we never use the D word in our house. We don't use the word divorce. We've never, ever said that to each other in anger. We've never said, I'm going to divorce you, or we're going to have to get divorced. In fact, even saying the word is really hard for me because we've never done that. It was kind of one of those core values we had. But it didn't mean that we were trapped. And I think that was important. Like it didn't mean, but we can't ever talk about this is not working. But I think that was really powerful. Another thing we've never done is like, we've never laid a hand on each other. I mean, or we just don't lay hands on each other. And we don't scream at each other,
Mm-hmm.
which I think has been very helpful.
Mm-hmm.
Again, I think our parents were really good role models for that. So if you come from a home where people were screaming, it's harder to break that cycle.
Yeah.
But I think that's been very helpful. We don't cuss at each other
Mm-hmm.
in anger. Like we just don't have, there's certain habits that we've formed that I think keeps it somewhat respectful in the journey. But also I would say for me in our marriage, one of the best things that you've done for me, besides,
I don't.
Yeah, you do. Is that you have treated me not like a preacher or a pastor or a business owner or a leader or a mom. You treated me like a woman. And I think that's been really profound. As a woman, you treat me like a woman. And so you open the door for me, or you'll give me flowers, or you'll send me a nice text, or you'll tell me I look nice, and things that I think as a woman I need to hear. And I think that's been really important, that you haven't gotten lazy with that, I think, in our marriage. And that's been really something I'm very grateful for.
Mm.
Yeah.
Well, I think that almost 20 years in, I think that I can see how marriages become that. Meaning where it just becomes, we're either just roommates, or it just becomes like there's no pursuit, because you just get into your habits. Or
how do you know to pursue that? How do you remind yourself?
I think for me, honestly, sometimes I do find myself getting caught in the monotony of life, and then realizing like or asking myself like, how am I pursuing Havilah? And having to actually keep a pulse on that, because sometimes you just get busy. We have 4 kids, all the different things going on. And so I think for me, it's just having a regular check-in with myself to not just check a box, but to actually assess what is my connection level, how connected are we? How have I reached out to you?
Yeah.
How am I connected to you? And so I think that's a regular thing for me.
And that's one of the questions was, how can we keep the romance alive, especially when life is full of responsibility? So I'm going to give you some kind of rapid fire questions to answer.
Okay.
So one of them is, what does it mean to be truly vulnerable with your spouse, and how does it deepen your bond?
Oh man. Well,
as a feeler,
no,
I'm teasing.
It's being vulnerable is oftentimes it's the place that I end up hating,
I know.
which is when I
too.
feel super weak. And so I feel super weak, or like I don't have the ability to do something, and then letting you into that.
And what's wild for a woman is that when you say that, a man thinks they're going to be disrespected for not knowing what to do. But when a man says, I don't know what to do at this moment,
mm-hmm.
a woman respects that.
Mm-hmm.
It's the opposite.
Yeah. And so letting you into my inner world, basically, of like my fear or my frustration or my confusion or not knowing what to do or feeling stuck, all that kind of stuff. Or just mistakes.
And I feel like that's a really sacred space. Like when you let me in at that level, I tend to really, really try to never use that against you. If you say something, I never use that as leverage of like, you said you didn't know how to do this, or you don't, I really try. Cause that's the first thing you think of when you're in an argument is like, let me remind you. But I feel like if you want vulnerability, you have to actually respect the sacredness of someone being vulnerable. And if you use it as
mm-hmm.
leverage later, then don't expect them to open up again.
Yeah.
Because then you showed them what you'll do with it.
You've never done that.
No. Not that you know of. I'm kidding. Okay. What does it mean? I'm sorry. When you're facing tough times, how can you stay connected rather than drift apart?
I think you have to be intentional to recognize this is a tough time.
What about Havilah? What do you do for me that is unique?
When we're not doing well,
or when we are facing, we are disconnected. What's something that will bring me?
I will get you flowers. I will try to lean into communication to let you know I'm here, and I'm going to keep pursuing. And even if I don't know how to do it or know what to say, I'm just going to keep showing up. So I think where I want to be quiet or just avoid you or just be like, well, I don't know. She'll like, maybe, she'll figure it out in a couple of days or get over it or whatever it is, whatever we're struggling with, whether it's,
and it's very helpful to your spouse. Just say, get over it. It's not a big deal.
Yeah. It's not a big deal.
It's not a big deal.
Why are you overreacting?
That's really helpful.
So
right.
I try to really pursue you and not be afraid to lean in.
And usually if we're in that space, I tend to not respond to you initially because it's like we've been, you're almost like roommating it a little bit. And so then when you're reaching out, it's like, okay, are you just, trying to be intimate? Like what's happening? And then I realized, oh no, you're trying to reconnect, like just emotionally. So you kind of have to be okay with a few like dismissals a little because my brain isn't there either.
Yeah. And I, of course, want to be reconnected quickly. And so when you don't want to reconnect quickly, I'm just saying.
Oh, you do. No, when you're ready, you're like, let's
work it out.
And I'm not ready. Yeah.
And so I think for me being patient to realize, hey, you're not there yet. And to let you be able to sit there and experience what you're experiencing.
Without forcing me.
Without trying to, force or demand but just be faithful.
So here's another question. What can you do? What do you do? This is what somebody else asked. I don't know if this relates to us fully, but what can you do if your physical intimacy is not what it used to be?
Well, that's a good question. I think number one, I think having an open communication about it with your spouse is important to say, okay, what do we need?
Yeah.
I think being able to figure out what season is it.
Yeah, I think so too.
And being able to say, hey, understand, because at the end of the day, it's intimacy is for each other and for the other person. And so if I'm showing up to get my needs met, that's not a good starting place. And so I think having a conversation to say, hey, I can communicate what I'm feeling, but how do we work together to...
But also I would say with sex and intimacy, I think that, again, I don't think I've used it as leverage or tried to use it as like a withholding to get you to do something or not do something. I think it's a dance that you have, right, in life, which is like usually somebody wants the other one without the other one wanting the other. It's just how it all works, right? But I think in our marriage, I think that we have prioritized sex and intimacy in our marriage. I think that's been something that we really have, hopefully. And I'm really grateful that in my family growing up, it was very healthy. That I knew that sex was a healthy part of marriage and it was part of what we do. But it wasn't until we went through tough times. And then you have to be vulnerable with somebody that you want to go like, I don't want to open up to you in the most vulnerable area. And then understanding that God made us differently and that was vulnerable for me. So you sharing vulnerability with your heart is not as vulnerable as it is me sharing my body with you when I'm not okay. And that was, and not forced, but an actual vulnerability of like, this is where it feels vulnerable as a woman.
Yeah.
To allow you to get to be close to me like this when I'm upset or when I don't think we've figured this out yet. And realizing like, that's actually really important to our marriage.
It's true. And you're right. We've done a great job of prioritizing physical intimacy. And I think that when you feel the least like being connected physically, that's when you have to lean into it. And you've done a really good job of that.
I've had some core values.
Because whether it's, we're just feeling disconnected, or maybe you're on a trip and, we're apart for a few days and, you're coming back and it's intense and you always prioritize like reconnecting. And then also, I think I would say just one more thing on just the emotional level of, in the same way that for me opening up emotionally and you feeling connected emotionally, you being able to give physically with your body that way when either you don't feel like it or you don't feel connected is very vulnerable.
It is.
And I know that we've had lots of conversations about that and how important that is, but it also helps reestablish connection as well.
And I think that's the powerful part. I think there was a understanding when I started traveling so much that The only thing we share in the intimacy level of that kind of depth is the physical intimacy. So, and again, I think it's worship in marriage. Like it's a powerful thing. And so I knew the sooner we could be together intimately after I came home, the more we would work as one rather than two. And when you're on the road, you have this kind of celibate lifestyle. You're on your own, you're in hotel rooms by yourself. You are really celibate. And I'm so grateful for the years of purity that I lived in and like walked in. So when I'm on the road, I don't have to figure out how to do this. But have you ever been nervous about me being on the road and that leaving me vulnerable or us vulnerable?
Not very often at all.
I know.
I legitimately, and I think it's just a testament to how you live and how you have not only just honored me, but I think that I literally have never worried. I think that you are, because I see how you live in the rest of the areas of your life. And so I think that, and you have a great reputation. And I think that you've proven that for years and years and years, even with me. And whether it's we're working through something, even if we're not in the best place and you leave on a trip, I've never worried about it.
It's amazing. I remember me getting up and preaching and we were just at each other's throats and I got up to preach. And I remember that feeling of just like, this is a terrible feeling. Like, I hate this feeling of like us being so not okay and getting up. And so I think that was another thing we worked into. It was like, hey, can we pause on this and we'll go back to this, but I can't go up and I can't preach and minister knowing that you are not okay at the deepest level. Like, can you give me grace to like pause? And I think almost like bringing you into that was really important as well. And not just going, I can live two lives at the same time. Like, no, I want to be authentic and bring it into both. So it does affect me. And I think that's important. As we close, I know this has been a good conversation. And I'm curious, what are things that you are thinking about in our marriage right now and things that you would like to work on?
What are things about myself that I want to work on?
What are you most proud of me about?
Honestly, right now, I've had more and more the thought of just realizing like our kids are growing up.
Yeah.
And at some point all of our kids are going to leave the house and then it's going to be you and me and the dogs. I'm thinking to myself a couple of things. Some of it is just realizing, man, I have a couple more years to really demonstrate marriage to my boys who are growing up, becoming men and going to be husbands and fathers one day. And so I'm really aware of that.
Yeah.
I guess I feel more of a sobriety of like, man, it feels like almost a little bit, not even a halfway point, but it feels like a different season. And so I'm thinking about how do I maximize the next couple of years in showing my sons how to honor you, how to have a great, healthy marriage. And they'll obviously hopefully see it when they're adults as well. But then I think about, then also, when they are out of the house, what is our marriage going to look like?
I know.
And how do I pour into that differently?
We'll have money again. Food.
I know, but I don't know.
I'm teasing. But you know what? You know what I think of is if our boys are half the men that you are, they're going to be great. That's what I think of because you excel at a lot of things, but I think you excel most at being a husband. That's what I think.
Well,
your parenting's okay.
My parenting is a lot of room for improvement there.
Yeah,
gosh. I don't know.
But
I don't know about that.
husband-wise, I'm like, I don't think they could have had a better example than you.
That's very kind.
And of course, having the mother that they have.
Yeah.
It's only uphill.
I mean, I'm very grateful for the families that we came from, for your family.
Me too.
I think that it's, even for when you talk about marriage and kids and all that, obviously, the marriage is such a sacred thing that God created and the role that it plays in building healthy families. And so I guess that's more of the responsibility that I feel.
Yeah.
Of like, man, I want my kids to continue to grow up and have healthy, awesome lives. And so And I want to be a part of that. And how I can do that is me continuing to show up.
It's true.
So,
well, it has gotten better. Marriage has gotten better and better.
It has.
The last 10 years, I think
I love our marriage.
Me too. And I think it's been the best. We've had the best, like friendship, sex, all of it's been better. And I think it's because we've built trust. We've worked hard, and we have something really beautiful. And there's still work. There's still work to be done, at least on your half.
Yeah, for sure.
You know, it's hard to be married to a perfect person.
I think one of the biggest downfalls or mistakes that people have in terms of their marriage, you know, just not either failing or not being what they want, is for them to not continue to grow and change.
I know.
And be willing to, and realize like, yeah, it's work, because it's the people that you are the closest to have the power to hurt you the most.
Yes.
And love you the deepest.
That's right.
And so I get the choice to show up in that and either contribute towards the health and growth of that relationship, or I can continue, or I can stop and just go to a certain level.
It's so true.
And it's not going to grow on its own.
It won't.
It'll go backwards.
It's very true. And I hope that we do that well. You know, I do. I'm so grateful, even for this series on marriage and just having a month to talk about this topic. And again, it's really a big topic. It's hard to talk about marriages like this.
Yeah.
But I hope that this conversation has been good for everyone watching. And I'm really grateful that you're here. Of course, my husband's incredible, and I'm very grateful for you. I didn't always feel that way. Sometimes I wanted to be a glorified widow. But today, I think he's incredible. And ultimately, I hope you have hope. So wherever you are, if you're in the thick of it and you're going, this is really hard, or you're at the sweeter years, listen, I'm just so grateful that you're here, you're listening to this podcast. And if you know somebody who is in the season of marriage, and maybe you're a parent and your kids are getting married, or they're in the marriage moment, and you want to give them some good content around it, share this podcast. Tag them, let them know that we're talking about this conversation. And most importantly, join us for the rest of the month, because this whole month is going to be on marriage, and we have some really good conversations coming up. Babe, thanks for being here.
Thanks for having me. And thank you for being such an incredible wife.
You got the check.
No, you seriously though. Like I think of this all the time, just in closing. I know we're wrapping up, but I would not be half the man that I am without you. I feel like you have empowered me, encouraged me, been my champion through the ups and the downs, you know. And I do feel like right now we're in a really sweet spot, but it's not because of all the work that I've done. It's because of all the work that you've done too. Like we've both done the work.
Yeah, we have.
And you've, so I love our marriage. I love you. I love what we get to do together. So
me too. I love you too.
Thanks for not giving up on me.
Isn't it great to know that when the kids leave, that we'll have each other? That's the best part about having a good marriage.
That's really, it's something I really look forward to.
Yeah, me too.
Some people don't.
I know. And I can see why, because your kids can consume it. Anyway, I love you, babe. I love you guys for watching. Thank you. And don't forget to subscribe so you don't miss any of the episodes that are coming up on our marriage month of March month of marriage. I don't know what we're going to call it.
It's exciting.
So thanks for being here, and we'll see you next time. Bye.